From the outset, electric vehicles, EVs, captured the hearts and minds of forward-thinking consumers. The earliest adopters weren't merely after the novelty of electric propulsion. They were deeply motivated by a belief in doing right by the planet. Fueled by visions of cleaner air, reduced carbon emissions, and a bold shift away from fossil fuels, these pioneers eagerly championed the EV revolution, often overlooking its early shortcomings in favor of long-term environmental gains. Yet in recent years, that early enthusiasm has dimmed for a sizable portion of EV owners, especially in the United States. Recent industry data reveals that nearly half, 46%, of EV owners are contemplating a return to gasoline-powered vehicles. That pivot stems from a complex web of evolving frustrations and practical roadblocks that were either underestimated or completely unanticipated during their initial purchase. One of the foremost frustrations contributing to this retreat is charging, or rather, the anxiety that surrounds it. While the vision of an electrified transportation future rests heavily upon the promise of convenience, the reality continues to fall short. In regions beyond tech-centric hubs like California, or countries with highly developed charging infrastructures such as China, public charging remains sparse. Even in well-equipped areas, the practical experience can be disheartening. Attempts to charge can falter or fail altogether. For instance, a study anchored in Berkeley highlighted that roughly 1 out of every 5 charging sessions in California fails to complete successfully. To compound matters, many EV owners lack access to home charging solutions, particularly those living in apartments or shared housing without dedicated parking. Forced to depend solely on public chargers, they face unpredictable availability, unreliable functionality, and rising costs, all of which strain the supposed comfort and cost advantage that EVs were marketed to deliver. Layered atop charging insecurities is the growing realization that the actual cost of operating an EV often doesn't live up to its advertised frugality. Manufacturers pitched EVs as inexpensive to run, buoyed by the lower expense of electricity relative to gasoline and reduced maintenance needs tied to fewer moving parts. But a divergence between theory and daily reality has emerged. Many owners, especially those reliant on public networks, are encountering escalating expenses. Premium fees, pricing complexity, idle charges, time-based or demand-based surcharges, and occasionally opaque billing practices can even push the cost of charging a battery to rival or exceed gasoline refueling in local terms. Without the consistent fallback of home-based, off-peak charging, EV ownership begins to feel less economically advantageous and more like a gamble. Additionally, the gulf between manufacturers' range estimations and real-world performance continues to disillusion owners. Automakers frequently promote models capable of traveling 300 miles or more on a full battery, but those figures are typically derived under optimal, laboratory-style conditions. In everyday usage, variables such as frigid winter weather, soaring summer heat, high-speed highway driving, hilly terrain, and even cargo load can significantly reduce effective range. Couple that with the inability, again, especially in multi-unit dwellings, to consistently charge to full capacity, and the discrepancy becomes glaring. A battery that's technically capable of 300 miles may realistically yield significantly less when the rain starts falling or when a passenger load increases. The gap between expectation and reality sharpens range anxiety and erodes confidence over time. Then there are the unanticipated reliability headaches. Early messaging touted EVs as low maintenance and exceptionally dependable, thanks to their simpler mechanical architecture. In practice, experiences have diverged. Increasingly, reports have surfaced of EVs encountering software bugs, battery degradation, and build quality hiccups, sending owners back to dealerships more frequently than expected. Some warranty claims have ballooned with issues like infotainment crashes, battery performance inconsistencies, or even structural quirks. In fact, recent assessments suggest EVs have been registering up to 80% more service problems than comparable internal combustion vehicles, counter to the intuitive promise of fewer moving parts, equating to fewer breakdowns. Alongside these operating and ownership concerns lies yet another significant deterrent: steep depreciation. While all new cars tend to lose value, EVs have been experiencing a particularly dramatic drop in resale prices. Early adopters who plunk down premium costs for the promise of cutting-edge technology have seen that investment evaporate rapidly, This trend has been exacerbated by manufacturers discounting certain EV models heavily to stimulate sales in a cooling market, which has further depressed the secondary market. Owners find their vehicles plummeting in value within mere months, undercutting long-held expectations about long-term ownership value and return on investment. Perhaps the most philosophically jarring realization for some is that EVs might not be the environmental panacea that earlier messaging implied. At the point of production, the ecological footprint of an electric car can be substantial, particularly due to mining the rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt, or nickel required for batteries. Extracting and processing these materials consumes energy and often occurs under ethically fraught or environmentally destructive conditions. And it's not just the initial build phase. As of now, around 70% of the electricity generated globally, especially in key markets, still comes from fossil fuel sources, meaning that charging EVs often relies on grid power that isn't fully green. The result is that in many regions, the total greenhouse gas emissions tied to driving an EV can compare closely to, or in some cases even exceed, those of a traditional internal combustion vehicle, once full life cycle emissions are considered. That realization undercuts the eco-virtuous rationale that motivated many early adopters, leaving them feeling complicit in a narrative that doesn't deliver on its green promise. These 6 interrelated factors, charging anxiety, soaring public charging costs, diminished real-world range, rising reliability concerns, accelerated depreciation, and qualified environmental benefits, are pushing many early believers out of the EV camp. Their experiences, once defined by optimism and idealism, have become increasingly punctuated by frustration and skepticism. But the story doesn't end there. Since the emergence of these concerns, the EV industry has been adapting and evolving. Infrastructure expansion has become a focal point for policymakers and private enterprises alike. In the US, federal and state governments are allocating billions to build out charging networks, incentivize fast charging deployment, and standardize access. In cities across America and Europe, urban charging solutions, from curbside chargers to residential microcells, are being piloted to reach renters and dwellers who lack dedicated home plugs. Public-private partnerships are increasingly supporting the rollout of ultra-fast chargers along interstate routes, aiming to make long-distance EV travel more viable. Similarly, there's growing momentum behind technological improvements to battery performance and range estimation. Battery chemistry has advanced, with next-generation solid-state designs and new cathode compositions delivering both higher energy densities and faster charging. Car makers are integrating smarter thermal management systems to better adapt to temperature extremes, and vehicle software is beginning to offer more conservative and calibrated range estimates under real-world scenarios, helping reduce the gap between expectation and performance. Reliability is also coming under scrutiny, with manufacturers leaning on over-the-air software updates and hardware redesigns to patch bugs and improve durability. Original equipment manufacturers have invested heavily in refining manufacturing processes, reinforcing quality control, and optimizing battery lifecycle management to reduce in-service failure rates. Warranties are being extended, service networks expanded, and diagnostic tools made more transparent, attempts to rebuild consumer confidence. Depreciation dynamics are shifting too. As consumer acceptance grows more mainstream, demand for used EVs is slowly rebounding, which is helping stabilize resale values. Manufacturers are offering lease return programs, and insurers are refining depreciation models. Some regions are trialing lithium battery buyback or recycling incentives, which bolster the residual value of end-of-life vehicles. On the environmental front, the green credentials of EVs are increasingly improving. Grid decarbonization is accelerating in many key markets, particularly across Europe and parts of the US, with expanding renewables portfolios ensuring a higher share of clean energy input. Recycling technology is enhancing the circularity of battery materials, reducing the environmental cost of extraction. And ethical sourcing standards are gradually tightening, though challenges remain. While these initiatives are promising, they often lag behind the urgency many early EV adopters now feel. Those who once viewed electric vehicles as the saviors of future transport wonder whether last year's idealism was premature and whether enough has changed fast enough. The uphill battle between promise and practicality has turned into a race against time, not just for infrastructure and engineering, but for perception and trust. The road to widespread EV acceptance is undeniably challenging. It demands not only innovative batteries and sprawling charging networks, but a rebuilding of trust tarnished by early disappointments. As the technology matures and policy catches up, the electric future may still fulfill its promise. But until then, the voices of those once enraptured by clean energy dreams, now unsteady with tempered expectations, will echo what matters most. Not just the allure of what EVs could be, but the tangible, everyday lived experience that defines whether change endures.